Can you guys hear us?
Welcome. Okay, we are unmuted. I am calling to order the Ava Community Energy Executive Committee meeting of Wednesday, May 7th. The time is 3:03 p.m. And let's see, we are located at 1999 Harrison Street, Suite 2300 in Oakland, and there are remote locations at Hayward City Hall at 777 B Street, Hayward, California 94541, and also the City of Pleasanton City Council Office at 123 Main Street, Pleasanton 94566. Members of the public wishing to make a comment at any during both public comment and when we're talking about agenda items can either do so by using the raised hand function on Zoom or *9 if you're joining through the telephone. Clerk, can you please take a roll call?
Thank you. Alameda County.
Oh, we can't hear you. That's my bad.
Present.
Hayward.
Present.
Stockton. Pleasanton. San Leandro.
Present.
Piedmont.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Okay, quorum has been established. We are going to move on to item number 2, public comment. This item is reserved for persons wishing to address the executive committee on any Ava community energy related matters that are not otherwise on this meeting agenda. Public comments on matters listed on the agenda shall be heard at the time the matter is called. As with all public comment, members of the public who wish to address the committee are customarily limited to, I believe it is 2 minutes. And each speaker must complete an electronic speaker slip or a speaker slip here in the meeting. And do we have any members of the public either in the room or online who wish to make a public comment at this time?
There are no hands raised at this time.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close item number 2, public comment, and move on to item number 3, which is closed session public comment. The executive committee will be adjourning to closed session here in just a few minutes, and that is in respect to the public employee performance evaluation under California Code Section 54957, performance evaluation of the CEO Howard Chang. Do we have any members of the public in the room or online who would like to provide a closed session public comment?
There are no hands raised at this time.
Do we have any members of the committee who want to make any comments? What is it? I feel like somebody's coming in and out.
We had one hand raised, but it was put down. So, and member
Chair
Bulge
Bulge is in the,
joined
yeah.
us.
It just sounds like there's a little bit of sound coming out.
We're getting some noise back and forth. So just to clarify, we do not have any public comment on our closed session agenda item.
Yes, please use the hand raised feature if you are joining us from a remote location. There are no hands raised at this time.
Okay, great. And I am confirming that we
We do have one.
We do have one. Okay. All right. Felt like there was something. Okay, yes. So 2 minutes to that member of the public who would like to make a comment.
Jonathan Tedesco, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
I don't think he wants to.
He may just be raising it.
I think he's coming on for the closed session.
Jonathan, I sent you a link for the closed session item.
Okay, thanks. That's what I wanted to make sure that I had.
I
Thanks so
realized
much.
I had sent you this link, but not the other. So
Okay.
You're good now.
All right, thanks, Cinder.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so now we are closing public comment for agenda item number 3, and we are adjourning to agenda item number 4, closed session.
In conference room seven.
I need to find that.
So for those remotely, we are moving to that remote link for closed session.
Does the public stay here?
Yes.
Closed session is, yeah. closed.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, go ahead and mute.
for our quorum to be reestablished. It looks like we have our quorum back. Can everyone hear me? Great, okay. We are returning from agenda item number 4, closed session, and have nothing to report. And that is agenda, oh, sorry, I skipped ahead. Agenda item number 5, nothing to report out of our closed session. Agenda item number 6, we have approval of minutes from March 7th, 2025.
So moved.
We have a motion on the table by Member Gonzalez. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Member Roche. We're gonna pause here for any public comments. Do we have any public comment on our minutes?
Are there no hands raised at this time?
Okay, no public comment. We're gonna proceed to a roll call vote, please.
Thank you. Alameda County. Hayward.
Aye.
Stockton.
Alameda County stepped out of the room.
Great. Thank you. Pleasanton.
Abstain.
Okay. Piedmont.
Aye.
Okay. And we are just waiting for Alameda County.
Sandra, aye.
Yes. Thank you.
I'll tell, hold on. All right, hold on. Here comes Alameda County.
Present.
Okay, we are
Okay, they're
voting on
voting.
the minutes from March 7th. Wondering if you approve of the minutes.
I apologize. I do.
Thank you so much. Okay, minutes are approved. Agenda item number 7 is a draft budget review for this coming year, 2025-2026. It's an informational item, and it will be presented by our CEO, Howard Chang.
Great. So if you can pull that up, Adrian, I'm going to try to move very quickly because we do have 3 pretty meaty topics here, and we're conscious of time. So we'll jump right to slide 3, Adrian. The first section is an introduction section for some basics. I'm going to fly through that and just say, as is typical, the bulk of our expenses are energy related, 90+%. Less than 10% tends to be overhead related, overhead and local development funding related. Next slide, I'm going to skip through that, sort of basics of energy delivery. Next slide, Adrian, slide 5. On slide 5, just a graph that shows sort of our distribution across Bright Choice and and R100 energy products, and you see that split between residential and C&I. And obviously, our R100 product is at a modest premium to PG&E, and we've kind of noted some of the historicals there in terms of how that's trended. For Bright Choice is at a 5% discount, and you can see sort of historically how that's trended too. So that's slide 5. Slide 6, nothing meaningful to know other than just to say that we have working capital we have to manage, obviously, based off of when we serve customers, when we bill customers, and then when we expect payment due, which is in the 3rd month. So there's always working capital you have to manage through as a result of that, of the billing cycle. Jump forward to slide 8. The next section is on PCIA, which is quite meaningful, and we'll cover this section. It's a handful of slides, and then we'll jump into the actual draft budget itself. So very, very, very basic PCIA related primer. That's the power charge indifference adjustment. This is in order to make PG&E whole on the stranded costs that they have as a result of customers departing and moving to CCA service. Right now, there is a proceeding underway to address how the market price benchmark is set. And that is meaningful because there are energy resource adequacy and renewable portfolio standard related resources that get set year to year. And that's incorporated in both the rate setting process as well as the PCIA setting process. The last 2 bullets here are maybe the meaningful thing I'll point to. If you have higher market price benchmarks, MPBs, aka higher energy prices, you will have higher IOU rates. You also have higher AVA rates because we index to IOUs, and you will have lower PCIA. In that scenario, you have a larger operating headroom for AVA. Conversely, if you have lower market price benchmarks, lower energy prices, you will have lower rates. You have higher PCIA, and you have less operating headroom for AVA. And that's just important to highlight here. We'll talk a little bit more about that throughout the presentation. You can jump to the next slide, Adrian. So right now, as I noted, there is a rulemaking that the CPUC has opened in regards to the PCIA, Power Charge Indifference Adjustment. And it's specifically in phase one, they're looking at the resource adequacy market price benchmarks and how that is set. And they are posturing that potentially the RAMPB needs to be reformed. And in reforming that methodology, there is some expectation and risk that they will, there's a number of things that they're considering, which are listed here in terms of specific changes under consideration for how you pull data related to resource adequacy transactions that will then calculate the market price benchmarks. And in doing so, the expectation is the RAMPBs will be lower. And the result of that is PCIA would be higher. So there's implications to our operating headroom and our budget as a result of that. And they can be quite meaningful. If those changes take place, as we sort of expect them to take place, they'll likely take effect in January of 2026. And there will be a retroactive aspect that is really accounting for 2025 PCIA. Next slide, Adrian. That's pretty meaningful. There's a lot happening right now associated with this. So in May, there is a potential for a proposed decision on May 13th or May 27th. So it has not happened yet, of course, but it is possible throughout the month of May. And if that is issued, then there's typically a 30-day process for comments going back and forth, and then a final decision coming out June 12th or June 26th, depending on when a proposed decision may come out. Of course, that proposed decision could be delayed for some number of reasons. I think there is some expectation that it will be in the near term in order to allow for sufficient implementation timeframe and planning that could go into effect in 2026. So those are some key dates just on the horizon. I'll also note that there's also an updated ERA filing that's expected in May. That will be a filing that PG&E issues that will actually forecast its 2026 rate. So naturally, these things are really important for our budget setting process. Those have not happened yet. So we have, of course, provided a forecast, but there is a lot of uncertainty. And I think with these things taking place in May, hopefully June will be a little clearer, and we'll of course, present any updates then. Next slide, Adrian, slide 11. So just a little bit more on this PCI impact to sort of size what we're talking about here. And again, there is a range of outcomes that could take place based off of the rulemaking underway right now. I think the likely outcome, and at least our prediction, is that it is going to be meaningful. And in that scenario, what this graph depicts is we've provided two different updates in our budget. I'll go into that in a little bit more detail, but I'll really highlight the differentials between kind of two different scenarios from a budgeting process. And in one scenario, you can see in the orange side, it's sort of the upside process. And these are revenues that AVA would be generating. And on the blue is under a PCI reform scenario, what would those revenues be on a quarterly basis? And you can see obviously the blue bars are significantly lower than the orange bars. The black line is showing a cumulative, so as you add those up quarter to quarter, the difference, it adds up to about $187 million over the course of the year. That light blue line is the impact on a quarterly basis. So if you were to add those numbers up, that's where you get the 187. So if the PCI reforms, according to this particular forecast that we have, in 2026, they will seek to recover $187 million from 2025 PCI recalculations or PCI-related reform. So that goes to show you kind of it's a pretty meaningful differential between these scenarios. So we'll talk through these scenarios in a little bit more detail. Next slide, Adrian. I'm not going to go into this detail. This just goes to show you sort of we got three graphs here. One is resource adequacy, one's brown power, and one's RPS, so renewable energy. And we're just trying to show you the variability and volatility that happens year to year, and how even without PCI reform, there's a lot here that drives uncertainty and various outcomes in terms of rates and our our budget actuals. And then added to it, of course, is if you start to reform PCIA in the calculation, these numbers would get adjusted, and that would trickle through to meaningful changes to where the PCI gets set. Next slide, Adrian. This is a little bit of an eye chart, but I'll just touch on the bottom left graph kind of shows the distribution between PCI, which is in pink, and AVA AVA average generation rates, which is in dark blue. And obviously that is our headroom that we have to operate. So you can see over the sort of history of our agency, how that has fluctuated. And in 23 to 25, that's increased significantly in a rising cost environment. And you can see going into 26, we see that softening. So while we're talking a lot about PCI reform and the potential impacts there, it's very important, of course, to be mindful of the fact that rates are actually coming down for customers as a reflection of lower costs. So that's, of course, a good thing. And we'll talk about that graph in a little bit more detail in future slides. So Adrian, you can move on to slide 15. And in fact, you can jump to slide 16. So here we have the numbers. 4 columns. The column all the way to the left is what was budget approved last fiscal year. The column just to the right of that is actuals for this year. So actuals currently plus a forecast for what remains. And then the 2 columns to the right is really the focus of this discussion. So we have the upside scenario. And I want to be clear, when we say upside, I'm defining that as status quo scenario for the PCIA methodology. So, but we're calling that upside because that is not the scenario that we expect, quite frankly. We do expect some PCI reform. So the column to the right of that you can see is noted as PCI reform. We assume some meaningful adjustments to the PCI methodology. And you can see those numbers at a high-level summary. And we're going to walk through additional slides, going to break down some of these numbers. But on the upside scenario, you can see there is a net position of around $56 million. And in the PCI reform scenario, you can see we run a modest deficit around negative $5 million. The 2 big changes there are difference in revenue. And that revenue is driven off the fact that you have a higher PCIA in that column all the way to the right, which reduces our operating headroom and reduces our AVA generation rates and therefore reduces our revenue. So that's the big change to highlight there. And then 2 other changes we made to expenses. So one is that we lowered our personnel costs a little bit. So we've slowed our hiring plans in the PCI reform scenario. 7 new hires in the PCI reform scenario, 14 new hires in the upside scenario. We'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. And then the other one is local development funding allocation. So in the PCI reform scenario, we assume around $10 million. In the upside scenario, $25 million. Again, we'll talk through details of those differences. But those are really the key differences between these 2 scenarios. The other thing I'll highlight is these are 2 very good illustrative scenarios of where we think we could be over the course of the next fiscal year. But there's a high degree of uncertainty. It could be above the upside scenario. It could be below the PCI reform scenario. That's driven by both market volatility, and it's also driven by where will we go with PCI reform. So I wouldn't take these to be like, these are the 2 outcomes. This is really just to be illustrative examples for the purpose of this discussion, to talk to the board and get some feedback around what are some tools and what are some actions we would want to take in each of these scenarios. And with that in mind, as things play out in May and we get more information on what may happen on PCI reform, what comes out of the PG&E era filing, we will then have a better sense ourselves on how to forecast the numbers going to the June meetings. And then with feedback from the board on what actions we might want to take, depending on what those scenarios look like, we can come up with a recommendation of, what do we want to do as it relates to, say, value proposition or procurement targets or other things related to overhead and spending. So
should I actually, so it's coming up on 4:05. I know we have 2 more informational items, so I just want to make sure we're spending our
Great.
time the way you want us to spend
yes,
our
I'm going to jump to the next slide and then
Cool.
we'll get to
Okay.
the substance of that. So
Thank you.
next slide, Adrian, and thank you for the time check there. So I think this is the focus of where it would be most useful to get feedback. In a downside budget scenario, there's a number of actions we can take, and those are those sub bullets on the left side, right? We can adjust our value proposition, so that's our discount for Bright Choice or our R100 related premium. You can adjust our renewable energy and large hydro procurement targets. Right now it's targeted at 81% in total. You can adjust that lower. In prior years, we've adjusted that higher. We can adjust our local development funding. That is something that we have assumed in that reform scenario already. We can make adjustments to personnel and hiring. We have already assumed that as well. And the last one is you can take our surplus from this current year, which in that prior slide was over $110 million, and put that in a rate stabilization fund to allow us to utilize in future years in downside scenarios. So those are all different. Those are some of the biggest tools we have to manage a deficit. The numbers you see on the right look a little scary. I see some eyes, large eyes, right? So there's a lot of outcomes on what future looking years could look like for fiscal year 27 and beyond. We've modeled some, and these do look a little scary. They run some pretty significant deficits, and there's still a lot of uncertainty as to what those outcomes will be. So I'm not trying to say this is what we fully expect, but these exist in our modeling scenario. So we wanted to highlight those and really highlight important tools that we want to take into account. We don't think numbers will look like this for the next fiscal year. We are hopeful it won't look like that beyond, but it is important to be mindful of the trajectory of some of these things to the extent there is significant PCI reform. And these are the tools we have to use. So that's an area that would be really useful to get feedback. I'm going to jump to maybe like 2 more slides and then open it up for discussion. So Adrian, I'm going to ask you to go to slide 20 to kind of talk about each of these actions. So slide 20, this is a blow up of that prior graph that we saw. So related to value proposition, you can make adjustments. If you made an adjustment of 1% on 1% discount for Bright Choice, either be up or down, that amounts to about $7 million. So if you reduce your discount by 1%, you get $7 million more revenue. Increase the discount, you lose $7 million revenue. On the premium for R100, you can see that adds up to about $5.5 million if you adjust it by every quarter-cent differential. So those are things that we could do to adjust the value proposition to manage a deficit. Next slide, Adrian. The other thing we can do is related to our procurement targets. So right now, our procurement target for 2025 is 81% total renewable and large hydro, and that is also our target for 2026 calendar year. You can make an adjustment to lower that if we wanted to. The other thing we can do, and this is something I want to introduce and socialize, is the idea of compliance periods. Because we have variable intermittent resources that we look to procure, large hydro and renewable energy, there's different levels of output there year to year. If it's a drought year, that has significant impacts on your large hydro production. So the concept of a compliance period may make a lot of sense, where you are allowed to balance your procurement targets over, call it a 2 or 3 year period. And that's a thing that already exists for RPS compliance purposes. So that is something I would say we should consider, and it is also an associated budget sort of tool, because we have over procured in 2024. So in 2025, you could seek to balance and procure a little less in light of that over procurement. Next slide, Adrian. This power content label in 22 just kind of shows what the 24 content level looks like. We're going to end up at 93% large hydro and renewable energy. So that is about 12% more than our 81% target. So that's where sort of this compliance period concept comes into play. There's more detail to inform personnel and hiring and local development, and I'm happy to go into that detail, but maybe I'll stop here and see where the questions and feedback are in light of short timing.
So also in light of short timing, so this presentation is going to the finance subcommittee.
Yes.
Is it also coming to the full board as an informational item?
Yeah, so it's going to go to
Okay.
FAP tomorrow,
Okay.
and then it's going to go to the full board later in May as
Okay.
informational, and then we'll plan to, of course, in June, we'll bring it back. Probably bring it back to XCOM, because we hope we'll get some meaningful updates,
Right.
and then to the full board after that.
Okay, so really no decisions are being made. This is just to, as you said, socialize ideas and concepts and potentially start to talk about prioritization based on where these hypothetical situations,
Yes.
one of which will happen or somewhere along that. But okay, so turning to my colleagues, are there any questions at this time?
I'll give you one question.
Okay.
$187 million potential impact. Unclear how that's presented in here. Is it that revenue would have been 1.1 million? 1.1 billion. So just, I think being able to, not for right now.
Okay. I have a
but
clear
just
answer, but
be
yeah.
able to elucidate. And then the second question is that
It's
crazy
just one.
scenario of 780 million. Again, when you tell the story, again, make sure that it's really clear what that represents. If the sky falls, it's 780 million, and that's because this, and this happened. That's my feedback.
Okay, any other feedback or questions at this time,
Yeah.
members?
Yeah, one thing that would be helpful when we get to the other, the full board, it's sort of a weighting from, like, what's the staff's sort of weighting rate of, if we're gonna pull some of the levers to adjust things, whether we adjust the rates or our procurement strategy or development funding, that kind of thing. Disaster rating is like easy to do and good, and, you know, good sort of reduction in the budget, and, you know, maybe less controversial or whatever it is. So some sort of weighting scale for, like, and I mean weight by, you know, WEIGHT, like, you know, what is your weight at like the most, your recommendation and the best way to, what lever to pull first?
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Okay.
Great, that's great feedback. Any other questions or feedback at this time? We're gonna go turn to public comment. Do we have any public comment on this agenda item?
Yes, we do. Jim Lutz,
Recognized for 2 minutes.
minutes.
Thank you.
Yeah, Jim Lutz. I'm on the CAC, but I'm speaking for myself right now. I'm curious about the PCIA calculations, and those are to pay for PG&E's stranded costs for the departing customers that are now AVA customers. But has there ever been a third-party audit of the contracts behind those stranded costs? You know, these are what resources were covered in those contracts that were covering PG&E for, and when were the end dates of those contracts? You know, sooner or later they'll run out, and are we just taking PG&E's word at it for it, or has there ever been an independent review of those contracts, make sure that they're not playing any games with it? That's it. That's just a question.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment at this time?
There are no hands raised at this time.
Okay, I'm gonna close public comment, and if there is a very short answer to that question that staff wants to share now, that's great.
Sure.
If not, that's okay.
It's definitely, yes, there's visibility into what those contracts and methodologies are. We do validate it both ourselves and through consultants that are under confidentiality.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other discussion on this agenda item number 7 before we move on? Looking at my colleagues, I see no hands raised. Okay, we are moving on to agenda item number 8, unless anyone would like to reorder the agenda items, given that we have 18 minutes left.
I don't see any need to do that. I think
Okay,
we can
great, so we're
plan.
proceeding with agenda item number 8. And do you want to introduce it, or should we turn to JP Ross?
Yeah,
Okay.
JP Ross, Vice President of Local Development. If we can pull up the slides, Adrian, and we will similarly be brief. So bringing back to you an update for our critical municipal facilities program. Next slide, executive summary, please. Sorry, one more. So in short order, I think maybe we'll go to the maybe slide shift to AVA ownership and EPC contractor RFP. So we have been actively working to salvage this portfolio of projects. We've been working with the 6 cities who have been participating so far, and have been working with the cities to confirm participation. There's some updates there, and most importantly, kind of revising our savings methodology for the cities, and very importantly, switching to a direct ownership model where AVA would own the assets. And so those are kind of the key highlights that we've been going over for the last period of time. And as you may remember, we have a very consolidated timeline, very tight timeline to get these projects developed because of some net metering 2.0 sunset dates that hit in April of 2026. So if we can go a couple slides down, Adrian, to the shift to AVA ownership, one more, that one. So AVA is currently in the process of evaluating contractors who would develop these assets on AVA's behalf. So we're progressing through a power purchase agreement model. The counterparty there a couple months ago, based on uncertainty, in the federal landscape and with NEM2 pulled out. And so we've been really working to run a public works compliant solicitation process to identify contractors who can develop these assets for AVA, and AVA would own and operate these assets and take kind of the ITC and long-term ownership of these assets, and that will bring some level of development and ownership and operation experience to AVA as we think about AVA taking more of a direct long-term operation and ownership role in assets like these. And as noted, there's a very tight timeline to do that. Next slide, please. So we've been hustling on a request for proposals and moving on that pretty quickly. We went through an RFQ and then 2 rounds of pricing responses. We had 10 responses to our RFQ, 6 responses to our round 1 pricing, and then we shortlisted to 3 finalists who a couple weeks ago on the 21st and 22nd of April did some site walks and then provided some final bids last week, and we've done interviews and have a kind of final response based on the information we got out of those interviews coming in tomorrow. So this is an extremely tight timeline that is imposed on us that we're trying to be responsive to, and are moving through that process with the expectation to bring to the board a final recommendation or a recommendation for selection of a vendor at this upcoming board meeting. Next slide, please.
JP, can I make a recommendation that you jump to slide 13 and cover that?
Yes. So a couple things here. We have been working with cities to confirm participation, and we did receive some notification from a couple of cities, Oakland and San Leandro, of their determination to not progress. So that was just over the last couple of days, and after submitting these documents. So some of this, CapEx and risk will be reduced, and we have updated numbers for that, but we didn't have time to update the slide. So long and the short of it, just running off of the old numbers, is we're looking at about $10 million of CapEx. All of this has been reduced by about 36%. So it went from 10 million down by 3.6 million. So we will update the board slides on that upcoming. But there are several areas of risk that we are working through in order to provide the cities with a 0.5% savings. So the offer now to each city is a 0.5% bill savings over the term of the agreement, and we're basically locking that floor into the cities. There's lower upside and lower downside risk for the cities. That downside risk then basically falls to AVA, and we have to mitigate that risk through what we're doing over the next month as we try to secure this contract. But on $10 million capital expenditure, we have risk associated with missing the NEM2 deadlines. That's about $6 million in risk. That's a little overinflated, but there's a significant amount of risk in NEM2. There's tariff risk because of the equipment and knowledge or lack thereof about what tariffs will be when equipment crosses the border. And then there's increased expense from the bidders. And then lastly, the ITC risk. Now, ITC risk is a long-term risk. We won't know if ITC is going to be revoked for a long period of time. So that's a risk that only AVA can take on. But long and the short of it is there's a significant amount of risk, $14 million of risk on a $10 million CapEx portfolio. Our job in bringing a recommendation to you all is to bring that risk down by the time we would bring something to the board where we had a better handle on certainly the NEM2 risk and the tariff risk, which will be based on the contractor's willingness to sign a contract with liquidated damages should they miss the schedule, as well as their procurement policy and how much visibility they have on equipment that is either domestically located now or not as likely to be subject to tariff risk. So those are two of the main risks that we're trying to bring down in order to bring the board a recommendation, at the board meeting.
One thing I would highlight here is, as JP noted, again, let's assume all 12 sites move forward, which we know it's something smaller, but in that in that scenario, $8.9 million is the CapEx. So that sort of top left table, you can see that. So if you assume no ITC. And then if you look at the table below that, what we've shown is the nominal net cash flows is $1.6 million if you have no ITC. So there are sufficient cash flows if you have no ITC in that scenario. If you look at, if you assume a 6% discount rate, it is a loss to AVA. And so that's just something I want to make sure to highlight to the board of, on a nominal basis, you can be made whole. If you assume some level of discount rate, 6% is a reasonable discount rate, it's actually at a loss here. And the reason why we did it with the ITC is we're not going to know if we're going to get ITC for 2 years, and there is significant risk there, and we don't really have any control over that risk whatsoever. And so that one's one that the board would have to be comfortable with accepting. Whereas the other ones, you have some level of control over between now and the next year as we execute these projects.
Great, okay, so I appreciate the effort staff is going through on, to make the critical municipal facility program happen, because this is something we've been talking about for quite some time, so I appreciate all the efforts going into this. We have 9 minutes left, so I want to turn to my colleagues and see if they have any questions. It sounds like this is going to come to the board as an action item in 2 weeks.
That's the expectation, yeah.
Okay, and we all have the materials, so certainly if we have questions offline, we are more than welcome to follow up with staff on that, but right now, are there any questions at this time? Okay, I don't see any questions from my colleagues. I am going to turn to the clerk and see if there is any public comment on this agenda item.
Yes. Kelly Ferguson, recognized for 2 minutes.
Great, thank you, welcome.
Hello all, I'm Kelly Ferguson with NG. As some of you may know, the headquarters of our nationwide public agency division is just 10 or 12 blocks away at 12th and Broadway. We are a global clean energy company operating in 30 countries and have design built hundreds of solar resiliency and microgrid projects for public agencies in California, including cities, counties, schools, special districts, and municipal utilities, just the kinds of projects that are being discussed this afternoon. I'm here today to learn and to share our perspective, even though we aren't in the running for this award. NG has been following AVA since before it was even East Bay Community Energy, and probably have 100 employees that are AVA customers. We are all cheering you on and have every interest in your success. We have been tracking this project for well over 5 years. As you know, it has gone out to bid several times, and each time has had various problems with the award. NG had hoped to participate in the current process, but ultimately declined for 3 reasons. Number 1, the drawings we were being asked to rely on for the bid were inaccurate and outdated. You may be aware that building codes pertaining to solar, ADA, and EV charging went through major changes in July 2024, and the drawings didn't reflect that. Number 2, the process required the pricing, the bid itself, before site walks, which is out of line with best practices to get accurate bids. The steps in the process were out of order. And 3, committing to meeting the April 2026 deadline. Now, we have an awesome supply chain and we're super experienced and fast at municipal permitting, but knowing firsthand how impacted the solar subcontractor community is this summer and fall, because everyone, not just AVA, is trying to meet the deadline. We just couldn't in good conscience.
Thank you so much, that's the
Okay,
2
thank you.
minutes, so we've got to be all done,
Want to
sorry.
say,
No, no,
we hope to
sorry.
do business with AVA in the future,
Thank you,
and
so we're moving
we
on.
wish you the best for the current project.
Is there another public comment at this time?
There are no hands raised at this time.
Okay, I'm closing public comment, turning it back to my colleagues. Is there any other comments at this time? And if not, we are closing that agenda item and we are moving with our last 6 minutes onto agenda item number 9, and then turning it over to Alex
Thanks.
DeGiorgio.
Thank you, Mayor Anderson. Alex DeGiorgio, Senior Manager of Public Engagement. I'm very comfortable with 6 minutes. That's the difference between when I was born and my twin brother was born. Perfect. So I'm going to be presenting to you an update on the enrollment of unincorporated San Joaquin County in 2026. And I can take us to, I think it's slide 11.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, sorry. This would be,
Oh, page 11.
Yeah, page 11 of the staff report.
Slide 4.
Thank you.
Where? I'm sorry.
Slide 4.
Slide 4.
The actual, just stick with the. Yeah.
Thank you. So for some very quick background, AVA received certification from the California Public Utilities Commission in December of 2024 to launch service in 2026. And so staff is tasked with identifying the optimal month for enrollment. And the three considerations that we primarily look at when identifying what that month would be are listed here: financial impact, operational efficiency, and overall customer experience. With regard to financial impact, quite a bit of analysis goes into that. When considered with the other two considerations, March was the conclusion of for staff as far as the optimal enrollment month. I don't think I'll belabor each of those unless there are questions about that. What I'd like to do is then skip down to, and sorry, Adrian, I'm not sure exactly with yours which slide it is, but slide 9 that talks about the South San Joaquin Irrigation District. Thank you. Let's see, a couple more. Next slide, please. There we go. Thank you. So one unique topic that's within this, the enrollment of unincorporated South San Joaquin, excuse me, of unincorporated San Joaquin County is the South San Joaquin Irrigation District. So this is a water utility that is looking to municipalize to provide electric service within its service territory. Its service territory is one small swath of the county, as the name suggests, in the south. It primarily serves the incorporated jurisdictions of Manteca, Ripon, and Escalon, none of which are contemplating AVA service, but there's also some customers that it serves in the unincorporated areas. Could you go to the next slide, please? Yes, thank you. So the kind of cream colored, off-white colored area, that is the entirety of the South San Joaquin Irrigation District's service area. Within that, there are about 7,000 customers that are in the unincorporated areas. So you could call those overlapping customers between AVA's prospective service area and the irrigation districts. It amounts to or corresponds to about 100 gigawatt hours a year. That represents about 10 to 12% of both the customer count and the load that AVA is contemplating or is preparing to serve in 2026. It represents about 1.3% of AVA's total forecasted load for 2026. And because this is such a novel area, and by novel I mean where an irrigation district is preparing to acquire PG&E's infrastructure through an eminent domain proceeding before the CPUC, while AVA is preparing to serve the broader area. Staff is going to be recommending that we defer service to just those customers, those overlapping customers, while we work with SSJID staff to develop an agreement where we can mitigate the risk of AVA procuring for customers that will eventually depart, so that we aren't in the position of having some stranded costs related to that. Last detail, and then I'll be done. In June, so a month from now, basically, there's going to be a hearing to begin the litigation of the eminent domain proceeding. So litigating the costs to SSJD will be litigating the cost to acquire PG&E's infrastructure. So after that hearing, we expect to have a little bit more detail on what to expect in the future.
Okay, thank you for that update. So this will be coming to the full board in May as an action item?
Correct.
Okay. I understand one of our members has to leave in 1 minute. I'm hopeful that we can stay for a few, she's gone, okay. So member Marquez had to depart, but we still have a quorum. And if my colleagues allow, can we go 5 more minutes just to allow in case there's any public comment on this item? Okay, great, thank you so much. Do we have any questions from the executive committee? And I'm looking at member.
Yes, I just want to make sure, what I think I heard you say is that they will be lower in the prioritization of the rollout. We're not saying that we're not going to serve them potentially at some point, but it takes time to work through everyone and they'll be towards the bottom. Is that a fair summary?
Correct, yes,
Okay,
it'll be
thank
a
you.
later phase.
Okay. Any questions from my colleagues on Zoom? No? Okay. Any public comment on this agenda item?
Yes, there is. Jim Lutz, recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you.
Yeah, Jim Lutz again. Is there any way Ava can support South San Joaquin Irrigation District in their municipalization process? I mean, I certainly understand Ava wanting to avoid getting in a situation where it's harmful for Ava, but is there any way to help support South San Joaquin ID? And I'm thinking that there may be some cities, existing cities within Ava's district that in the future may want to do municipalization as well. And, you know, some way to support that happening is in the future. So just a concern looking at it sort of the other way, what can Ava offer SSJ?
Okay. Any, thank you. Any other public comments at this time?
There are no hands raised at this time.
Okay, and no members in the public? No, okay, great. I will close public comment on that agenda item. And if staff would like to provide a short answer to that question posed by the member of the public, that is fine. If you want to, you do not have to.
I don't have a short answer.
Okay, there's no short answer. Okay, thank you for posing the question. Appreciate that. So, and if we are already over our allotted time for this session, so I should ask before I move on, any other comments from my colleagues on agenda item number 9?
So if I may,
Yes, thanks.
yeah, so I've been able to talk to Howard about this a little bit more in depth about it. I am nervous that we would be involved in the irrigation district's action. I think Ava, because of the volatility of that and kind of the issues around it, I think the plan staff is kind of looking at is solid, but I'd be very careful, or I would like the full board to weigh in before staff would even consider putting Ava at risk in that. I mean, it's a lawsuit. I mean, it's gonna be a difficult situation between them. So I just want to express my concern with the public comment. I don't think Ava should be doing that based on the information I have at this point. And so I just want to make sure I say that.
Very much appreciate your perspective, and thank you for sharing that at this time. Any other comments or anything? Okay, we are going to go ahead and close out agenda item number 9. Thank you for that update, and thank you 6 minutes. That was awesome. Well done. And then our 10th agenda item is whether or not we have any member or staff announcements, including any requests to place items on a future executive committee agenda. Nope. Okay. Anything? Nope. Okay. Seeing none, I don't think we do public comment on that agenda item. So agenda item number 10 is closed, and agenda item number 11 is adjournment. I'm going to go ahead and adjourn at 4:34. Thank you so much all for hanging in there, and thank you staff for speeding up all the presentations. I'm sorry we were a little rushed today. Meeting adjourned.